Good evening, everyone. We're going to start today with a question. Have you ever felt like an outsider? I bet you have, because I think pretty much we've all felt like an outsider at times. In life, there's certainly times when we feel like an insider, so to speak, some place we feel like we belong, maybe if we're on a team or a club or in a class. But there's also times at some point when we all feel like an outsider. And today's Bible story is about someone who was an outsider. So I am going to read from Mark 1:21 to 28. Jesus throws a demon. Jesus and his followers went into Capernaum. Immediately on the Sabbath, Jesus entered the synagogue and started teaching. The people were amazed by his teaching, for he was teaching them with authority, not like the legal experts. Suddenly, there in the synagogue, a person with an evil spirit screamed, "What have you to do with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are. You are the Holy One from God." "Silence," Jesus said, speaking harshly to the demon. "Come out of him." The mean spirit took him and screamed. Then it came out. Everyone was shaken and questioned among themselves, "What is this? A new teaching with authority? He even commands unclean spirits, and they obey him." Right away, the news about him spread throughout the entire region of Galilee. So to discuss it, I'm going to give you a little quiz of sorts. So if you're watching this with someone else, with a sibling, then what I want you to do, I put up the questions, is go through the questions together, and there's 9 questions, and tell each other what you think, what the answers are. And if you're watching it alone right now, then find a parent or someone else in your household and go grab them and talk about the questions with them. So I will bring them up on my screen. Right. So what I want you to do is, now that I have the screen up, I want you to pause the video and go to the questions. And when you are done, you can start the video. Okay, so we are back, and I hope you've gone through the questions by now. And now we'll go through them together. So in what town did the incident take place? Right in the beginning, it said Jesus and his followers went into Capernaum. Second question, what day of the week of it? It was a Saturday. So it says immediately on the Sabbath. And the Sabbath in Jewish tradition is Saturday, so the day was Saturday. We'll be going to be coming back to that point and later in the questions. So Jesus was in the town. He was at the synagogue. And why were the townspeople amazed? Because he taught with such authority. It says, not like the legal experts, right? People were amazed by his teaching, for he was teaching them with authority. And they were impressed by that. And then after that, first he's being all authoritative and teaching well. And then after that, he gives orders to evil spirits, even more oppressive, right? So they were even more amazed by that. Now, what was wrong with this noisy person who came into the building? Well, according to the townspeople, he was possessed by an evil spirit. And today, we might say that such a person has a mental illness because there's something wrong inside of them. The chemicals aren't quite pumping out correctly. That might make them seem to act a little bit differently. Whose voice was Jesus listening to? He was listening to God's voice. So this was the point I wanted to come back to. We established that the day of the week that this happened was on Saturday, or on the Sabbath. And so a response that he could have received to his actions of healing on the Sabbath um, would have been pretty negative because, as it says in Deuteronomy, observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but on the seventh day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work. So on the Sabbath, you're supposed to rest. But Jesus didn't do that. He was teaching and banishing evil spirits. So some things that the disciples learned that day: going to worship regularly was important to Jesus, and that Jesus was a special kind of teacher. He taught in authoritative ways, as it says here. But he wasn't just any teacher. Jesus was God's holy messenger. They learned that. And they learned that Jesus accepted people that others thought unclean and shunned. So this man that they thought was possessed of evil spirits, he was a man that was an outsider in society. He was shunned by everyone else, but Jesus accepted him anyway, in spite of that. And they learned that it's important to help people become well again. So even though this man, they thought that was unclean, that there was something wrong with him, it's still important to help these people and to help them become well. And finally, so recall that Jesus was doing this work on the Sabbath, but they learned that it was all right with him to heal people on the Sabbath, even though it might be considered work by some. He was doing God's will and he was helping people. So it was okay to do that on the Sabbath. So this person who was possessed by an evil spirit in the story, he was an outsider in society of its time, right? He was shunned by the other townspeople. Think about who the outsiders are in our society and why are they shunned by other people and laughed at? Usually it's because they're just a little bit different, right? They don't necessarily fit the mold. But Jesus knew what in Capernaum, Jesus knew what to do about it. He knew he could help this person who was possessed, as they thought at the time. And so he did. He helped him. Even though it meant that he might be criticized for working on the Sabbath, he did what he knew was right. And he didn't let pressure from others stop him from doing what was right and from listening to God's voice. So there is someone else that, as I said, we're all of us at some point are going to feel like outsiders, because we're all unique individuals, right? We don't want to all be the same. Sometimes, especially at your guys' ages, I know sometimes you feel like you just want to fit in, but it's so much more interesting to be your own person. And that's what God wants us to do. Now, one person who felt like an outsider that might surprise you is Amanda Gorman. So Amanda Gorman, I think you probably know her name right now. I am hoping that all of you who are watching this saw her speak and read her poem at the recent inauguration. Or if you didn't see it at the time, that you saw the video of her reading her poem, her inaugural poem, because it was quite amazing and wonderful. And you might recall that we read one of her poems back in August, called An American Lyric. So Amanda Gorman, she seems like this. I mean, she's an amazing young woman, and she has such a presence and such a charisma. But she herself felt like an outsider when she was growing up. And there was a couple reasons for this. One is that just because of where she lived. So I'm going to read a quote from her from an interview from the New York Times about one of the ways she got into writing when she was young. And it has to do with how she felt like an outsider and how that actually contributed to her becoming a writer. I grew up at this incredibly odd intersection in Los Angeles, where it felt like the Black hood met Black elegance, met white gentrification, met Latin culture, met wetlands. Traversing between these worlds, either to go to a private school in Malibu or then come home back to my family's 2-bedroom apartment, gave me an appreciation for different cultures and realities. But it also made me feel like an outsider. I'm sure my single mother might describe me as a precocious child, but looking back at elementary school, I often described myself as plain weird, a plain weird child. I spent most of elementary school convinced that I was an alien, literally. The worlds I mentioned traveled between for school and home, of Blackness and whiteness seemed so foreign to me. While other students were in the jungle gym, I was writing in my journal on a park bench or trying to write my own dictionary. I was obsessed with everything and anything. I wanted to learn everything, to read everything, to do everything. I was constantly on sensory overload. I'd hoard dozens of books in my 2nd grade cubby and literally try to read 2 at a time, side by side. And then she goes on to talk about how her mom encouraged her writing when she was young, and so she wrote all the more because of that. So even this amazing young woman, Amanda Gorman, even she felt like an outsider when she was younger, but she used that to and channeled that into her writing and used it to help her create writing. Her writing helped her with that. Her writing helped her deal with those moving around between different worlds. It helped her process that. Another way that she felt like an outsider is that she has a speech impediment, which doesn't seem to be much left of it now. If you listen to some of her early poems, you can hear it more. But she had trouble in particular pronouncing her R's, which I can relate to because I, growing up, also had that same. And sometimes it still comes out that way. Sometimes I still don't say my R's very well. I had the same problem when I was young. And here she was, not only a poet, someone who works with words, but a performance poet. So not only did she write poetry, but as you saw, she typically usually performs them and does such an amazing job with it. So here's someone it was pretty important that she get over this speech impediment for what she did, although her speech called a speech impediment, but to me, it just sounds like it's her own unique voice. When I hear her earlier ones, when she's not pronouncing the R's, that was just her voice. Um, but anyway, it was certainly impacted how she was viewed by others as she's performing these poems. And so she might have thought then by some may have seen her as an outsider in some ways because of that as well. But she didn't let that stop her. She overcame it, and she's gone on to do amazing things. She's had some dreams of becoming the president, as she sort of alluded to in her inauguration poem, and I vote for her. All right, so to end, what I want you to do is listen to a poem of hers that's sort of about outsiders, and it is called, where I get the name of it right. The poem is called The Power of Firsts. So it's about students and young people that are the first person around them to do things. For instance, the first person in family to go to school or to go on to college. And for these students that are first, or these young people that are first, they're putting themselves in a position where they're setting themselves up to be outsiders, but they don't let them stop that from doing what they want to do and becoming powerful people in their own right, and from learning information. So I will link to that. I won't read it. I will link to Amanda Gorman reading her own poem at a City Year event, their Summer Academy in 2018, so 2 years ago. And it's the whole thing, the whole video I'm going to send you is 20 minutes long, so I'll cue it up to this particular poem because there's other poems that she reads too. And she talks a little bit about herself growing up and reads some other poems. So there's lots more in there for you to view if you want to view the whole thing. But I'll cue it up to this particular poem, The Power of Firsts. So I hope you enjoy it and you enjoy the rest of your week. Take care of yourselves, take care of others, and stay safe. And I'll see you next time.